right, everybody. Welcome back to Gridiron Gang, a Detroit News Lions podcast. We are entering the end of the preseason. Next week, the next time we talk to you guys, we'll be wrapping up the Lions preseason finale against the Houston Texans. But before that, we got some joint practices to talk about. We got some roster situations to talk about. Rich and I are going to be going through every position on the roster today, talking about hard locks, soft locks, bubble players, and just kind of having a discussion at each position as we figure out what this Lions roster is going to look like for week one. Before we get to all that, I am Nolan Bianchi. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Richard Silva. Richard, how goes it today?
It's going well today. Finished, wrote about Grant Stewart earlier today and his kickoff returns and what he's learned and things he's working on. But yeah, it's been good.
Awesome. We can just get going right away here. We can start with some injury news, some positive news, some not so positive news coming out of 222 Republic Drive over the last couple of days. Ahmed Hassaning, the big one, the rookie out of Boise State, edge rusher. He suffered a pec injury in the game against the Miami Dolphins on Saturday, and he is going to be down for, quote, a while. Unsure if it's season ending just yet, but it sounds like there's a possibility that could be the ultimate diagnosis.
Yeah, he did post on Instagram that it's not it doesn't require surgery, the injury, which is good. Like that is a positive for his potential return later in the season. Maybe the Lions could use one of their two IR to return spots on him for guys that get hurt in training camp in the preseason. But Dan Campbell was asked about that on whatever that was 2 days ago now on Monday. And he said that they're still kind of working through some things, figuring out exactly the length of the injury, and then they're going to decide on that. But yeah, I mentioned it last week. It's just a shame that a guy like him who, as I said, I think he in the preseason and even in training camp was better than what our expectations were for him, especially in the run game. And that would have, I think, gotten him on the field earlier than we originally thought. And now he's not going to. So it's a shame. But as Dan Campbell said, that he, if anyone's going to put in the work to get right and get back, it's going to be him. So.
Yeah, and, the Lions have had a couple of significant injuries this training camp, but they've either been to, for sure, roster players, but they're season ending, so you can kind of just take them out of the equation altogether. Ennis Rakestraw, potentially Dan Jackson could fit in that category as well. And they've had a couple of, for sure, season-ending injuries to players who we didn't have making the roster when we did our projections. Colby Sorsdahl, Justin Herron, Kenny Yeboah, just to name a few there. This is the first one where it's a serious injury to a player who looked like he might be a contributor, and we're not sure if it's season-ending, but it could be. So what that means is he's going to be eligible, depending on what they decide over the next couple of weeks here. He could be a player who ends up on the quote-unquote IR to return designation. So if you forget, at home, basically the Lions can take two players who did not start the preseason on the PUP list or the NFI list, and they can put them on injured reserve, meaning they don't count against a roster, but they also have the ability to return later on in the year if that's what the Lions choose to do, or if that player just makes it back in time. And right now, I think he's probably the only guy who qualifies for that. So depending on what the situation looks like over this next week, I mean, they only have one practice and one preseason game left. So I'm feeling like he is going to be a candidate to go on that list.
Yeah, I would imagine the only guys that I could think of that would qualify for that is him. Potentially Tristan Colon. I know he had the elbow injury against Atlanta that his Dan Campbell said going to be down for a while, and they haven't put him on any sort of injured list yet, which leads me to believe they think they can get him back at some point. And then another, I mean, maybe like Mo Norris, but the concussion thing is its own animal. Like that's something that it's going to have to play out, and then you'll see when he's available to come back. So I think it's really only those two, and then maybe three guys that could go on that.
Yeah, and when we originally talked to Campbell after it happened, he said, at least 10 to 14 days, which I think that he was just giving us the standard, concussion protocol time frame there. But obviously when it's something that was as serious as what Mo Norris suffered against Atlanta, you're taking maybe a little bit slower. He was asked the other day, do you anticipate him coming back this season? He said this to be determined. Gonna get him out there running around, see how he feels. But like he kind of said, it's just a day by day thing as of right now.
Yeah, he was out there on Tuesday during off to the side. He, not participating in any team drills or anything like that. But he was out there on Tuesday. He had his helmet on, was doing some stuff with the trainer, and then during individual drills, he was off to the side. And then once team period began, he shed the pads, shed the helmet, and was walking around in a regular T-shirt. But he was out there. He was on the field in some capacity. Obviously, no contact, but.
Well, on a more positive injury front, 2 Lions players get removed from the physically unable to perform list in as many days. Mekhi Wingo comes off this week. He had a meniscus injury last November, surgery in December. Thought that, I think we both talked to him on Locker Room Cleanout Day, and you and I were kind of the belief kind of coming away from it that he thought he would be back for week 1. But you found out something from him yesterday that maybe explained the delay in the process. I actually just messed up there. He said he would be ready for the start of training camp. That was obviously not the case. He has not practiced yet up until Tuesday. But what did you hear when you talked to him yesterday?
Yeah, he said, like you said, that was the initial plan, but he had to have a cleanup procedure on the knee. He said about 2-3 months ago. So you're talking, what is that, June potentially, maybe a little bit before that. But yeah, said he had to get the cleanup procedure done, which delayed him a little bit until now. He said he was like, he's suffered injuries before, and he actually said he's like, I kind of got a long laundry list of injuries, but never a knee, never a significant thing to my knee. So it was like this whole process was new for him, but he's happy to be back, obviously.
Yeah, and he sounds like he is still intent on playing week 1. I guess we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. I think a lot of times players maybe overshoot the timetable. Same with Khalil Dorsey. I mean, we could just jump right into him. Cornerback had the same injury as Aiden Hutchinson, the broken tibia fibula in week 15 against the Buffalo Bills. He was covering a route. His leg collided with that of teammate Ezekiel Turner, and he was out for a significant amount of time. When we talked to him on Locker Room Cleanout Day, he was kind of saying the same thing. Like he anticipated being back for training camp. That type of injury, severe as it may be, doesn't really have a ton of road bumps, but here he was. He said it took a little bit longer than expected. It was really hard to sleep at first, he said, and then eventually over time the pain subsided, but it still hurts. It's something that he's still kind of dealing with as he returns to the field here. So haven't really seen him in team periods yet, but just to get him going back in individual drills and knowing what he provides to the special teams unit, I think that's a huge bonus as well.
Yeah, I saw him doing some gunner stuff, which is obviously a plus. I think it was on air on Monday, just going through the motions. But that's where his value is. That's why he's on this team. So it's good to see him doing that.
Yeah. Position by position. Anything else from Dave Phipp yesterday? I was not in Allen Park yesterday. I was away for, just at a personal day. But what did you hear from Allen Park? We got to talk to Dave Phipp for the first time this season.
Yeah, I think two things. One, I mentioned Grant Stewart at the top. I feel like we kind of felt this already, but talking to him kind of confirmed it. It's like, hey, this is no like gimmick. Like this is no like we're just giving the gritty special teams guy a chance to do some cool stuff in the preseason. No, like it's for real. They saw stuff in him. Dave said that when they sign him, he was like he goes back and he watches all of the available film, even dating back to Houston before he was in the NFL. And when he was a sophomore at Houston, he had 5 rushes for 35 yards. And then in the Armed Forces Bowl at the end of the year, he had a 31-yard, I think, return. And Phipps said that watching those, he was like, this guy kind of looks natural, like a natural skill set moving with the ball in his hands. And then they roll into training camp, roll into the Hall of Fame game more specifically, and Vaki's down with the hamstring. Dorsey's still making his way back. If you remember last year, those guys returned some kicks for you. There is Craig Reynolds, there is David Montgomery still, but Phipp was like, man, like there's kind of an opportunity here. And he, what did he say? Something is the mother of necessity is the mother of all invention. So he was like, how about we try Grant Stewart, and they put him out there, and he jokes around. He's like, and then he fumbles the first kick that he fields. But he was like, no, yeah, he has shown growth, continues to show growth, and I think he said that he's a worthwhile investment basically at the position. So they're going to continue putting him there. I expect him and Vaki to be there, honestly, in week 1 in Green Bay. Like I expect those two to be the kick returners. We'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, health is contingent upon that. And then the second thing that we heard from Phipp was just the value that he puts on the special teams contributions that are coming from the receivers. And, he made this point, and it's interesting. He was like, we haven't really gotten that special teams work from receivers in recent years. obviously Khalif does the punt return, but that's kind of been it. Like JMO has been not involved in it, and I don't think that's by any. Like I'm sure JMO would want to. Like he did punt coverage. He was a gunner at Alabama. I just think the Lions have had those spots taken up, and then also they're trying to protect JMO and keep him just focused on receiver. Saint obviously is too good to play on special teams, and Tim Patrick doesn't provide much there. But now with Jackson Weeks, with Dominic Lovett, with Isaac Tesla, he's like, we are getting those contributions from those guys in the receiver room, which for Tesla's making the team, but for guys like Lovett, for guys like Jackson, who we're going to get into in a little bit here, that are real fringe, real bubble guys, I think that is a real difference for them to kind of earn a little bit of an unprompted shout out from FIP is telling.
Absolutely. And we are going to discuss that in just a second. They're going to be our third position on our position by position look at this roster entering the final preseason game against the Texans this Saturday. We'll start with quarterbacks because this has been, I would say, maybe the most heavily debated topic. Surprise, surprise, the quarterback. Everybody wants to talk about it over the last couple of weeks. But another poor performance from Hendon Hooker and, another really good performance from Kyle Allen leaves us all wondering, what is this team going to do at quarterback on roster cutdown day? I think after, it's been so fluid week by week, going into the Hall of Fame game, it was like, well, of course they're going to keep three quarterbacks. Hendon Hooker has shown growth and Kyle Allen looks good. And then after the Hall of Fame game, it's like, well, you need to just start over it, go get two more quarterbacks in here. And then since then, it's been more Hendon staying. Yeah. Don't even get me started. You guys actually do get me started. You guys do not want Carson Wentz with the ball in his hands in any sort of meaningful way this season. I would take Hendon Hooker with all the trials and tribulations that he has shown over these first couple games than Carson Wentz. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. But that's neither here nor there. So I think at this point of training camp, Goff is obviously a lock. I think Kyle Allen is a soft lock. And I would even venture to say he's probably a hard lock at this point. Yeah. Like, I don't think there's anything he could do. He'd go out there on Saturday, throw like 2 interceptions, 57 yards passing, whatever it may be. And I think he's still a lock to make the roster. So we'll put him in that soft lock category for now, but I think he's actually trending more towards being a hard lock. And then on the bubble, we have Hendon Hooker. Now, I put out my 53-man roster projection, my 4th of 5. Last week, and I had him making the team because I just feel like they're at a point with him where it hasn't looked good, but I still think there's enough intrigue around the league where if he gets cut, he's going to get picked up on waivers. And so I'm of the opinion that cutting him is essentially saying goodbye to him altogether. It's cutting bait on the investment that you made in him, all those things. I don't think that the Lions are ready to do that yet. And I could be proven wrong. I don't really, if I had to put a percentage on how much I feel that way, I'd probably say like 60 to 65%. Like that's what I feel. So it could easily go the other way. But I think Hendon Hooker is on this roster on cutdown day, and it's for that reason.
So you do our 53-man roster projections, and then I do one off to the side just for myself, and then so me and you can have discussion and debate here on the podcast and also off of it.
He puts in the work, folks. He puts in the work. You can say a lot of things about Richard Silva. He only eats bread. He thinks he could be in the NFL, but I will tell you, he puts in the work.
No. Well, thank you.
He's blushing so hard. So go watch the video to see Richard blush.
So the point I was making was that when I initially went through, I didn't have Hendon making mine. And it was basically, my thought process was, I know the first year was a redshirt year, but it's not like his contract stops or freezes. Like that's still one of the 4 years that you had him for. So now his contract remaining is this year and the following. And the reason why you drafted him is 1, the upside, obviously. And then 2, you kind of think to yourself, worst case scenario, we have a cost-controlled good quarterback for 4, but actually 3 years. Fine, that makes sense. But at this point, you're heading into year 3, and it appears that he's not going to be QB2. Even if he does make the roster, he's not going to be Jared Goff's primary backup. That's going to be Kyle Allen. So, and maybe that changes 2 months into the season, but I'm going to operate under the assumption that Kyle Allen is QB2 from start to finish. So now you're talking the best case scenario is he really improves next year, and he is definitively your QB2 next year, and you just have a good cost-controlled backup for a single year, 1 year. And my thinking when I think about that is, well, just re-sign Kyle Allen or someone similar. You know what I mean, to that, instead of carrying him and having him take up a roster spot this year. So that was my initial thinking when I went through. But then me and you talked about it, and you did sway me because one, this isn't a when we do this exercise, there's no point in what do Nolan Bianchi and Richard Silva think or what the Lions should do. That's really worthless, honestly.
Yeah.
Where are what is worthwhile is what do we think the Lions will do, because that's what's going to happen in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think the Lions are going to hang on to Hendon. One, because like you said, cutting him, I think is you're cutting like somebody is going to take a chance on him and sign him to their active roster. I think he does. You are saying goodbye if you cut him and you try to get him back on the practice squad. I don't think that's going to happen. And for a team that preaches patience and as much as they do with players, Brad Holmes talked about that with on a recent ESPN podcast where he talked about the whole situation with Jared Goff taught him, and he hopes teaches others around the league patience. So that's one thing. I think they are going to be patient, and they have invested a lot into Hendon already. And then secondly, and more importantly to me, the Lions are going to have 3 quarterbacks on their roster, including the practice squad, this season. Teams don't carry 2. They're going to have either 3 on the active roster or 2, and then plus a practice squad arm. Hendon's been here with John Morton, with this new offense, the whole time. So if you lose Hendon, now you're going to have to bring a third quarterback in that isn't going to be any help to Jared, because that guy's going to have to be, get his bearings when he arrives. Versus Hendon, where he knows all of this. And at the very least, he is a quarterback that in practice, you don't have to worry about him. Oh, does he understand this? Does he understand that? Can he give the starting defense this look that we're trying to give them? I think Hendon can do that because he's been here for as long as he's been here. So I do think that is his value this year. And with all that said, which is why I think the Lions are going to carry 3 quarterbacks on their 53.
Well, and not to keep going on this one single player, I promise we will move past individual players a little bit quicker than we're spending on Hendon Hooker. But, if you just think, like, I don't disagree with you about the point of, like, yeah, you can say he's a year 2 quarterback, but if you're talking the rookie contract, I don't really worry about that, because if he is just, like, marginally okay but doesn't start any games, like, he's probably not going to get some huge contract when he hits free agency. So you probably will be able to sign him at a pretty relatively low price if that's what he ends up being showing himself worthy of is a second contract in Detroit. And I another thing I would say is, like, you draft quarterbacks, you look at the situation that Anthony Richardson's in, and it's almost a light years difference of the situation that those 2 guys had coming out of college. Anthony Richardson, no disrespect, not a very good college quarterback, like, considering the talent and stuff like that, at least in terms of what he was producing on the field and doing with that raw talent that he had. And he's a guy, like, I think of all these quarterbacks who were taken top 10, top 15, whatever, you give him a couple years, but this is a guy who you knew you were going to have to break a lot of bad habits. I think this was a multi-year developmental project from jump. And am I saying that he should be a little bit better right now? I do think he should be a little bit better than what he's shown in the preseason so far. But also for a 3rd round quarterback who is coming in under the circumstances of, you're going to have to break a lot of habits with this guy, I don't really expect him to be that good at this stage. And I don't know if that's just being too fair to him. Like, I might be, being a little too fair to his situation, but just I don't know. I think it's just such a tough, unique situation with him where it's like if he was a starting quarterback and he was entering year 2, didn't really have a good year 1, and he looked a little bit shaky in the preseason, you're still looking at that situation being like, oh, like, he can figure it out. This quarterback took a couple years. That quarterback took a couple years. And I think they have time to let him figure it out. So I just don't think that at the end of the day, like, there's this big rush, and people are probably screaming at their podcast players right now, but I don't know. I don't think that like it's worrisome. It kind of is what it is, and he'll either get better or he won't. And if he doesn't, like, you didn't really waste that much money on him, no, not like cap space or anything like that, maybe developmental time and energy. But at the end of the day, it's like, what are you really wasting here outside of maybe a roster spot, the chance to keep a UDFA tackle or something along those lines?
Yeah, real quick on the last little bit on the Hendon thing. I know you said we're going to get off him. I think that is the word, like you said, that is exactly the worry, that you lose a Jackson Meeks or an Ian Kennelly or someone like that. Which maybe that's something you're willing to part ways with. I will say that I think on Hendon, a lot of it at this point is more mental than physical. I think we saw him have a really, really strong start to training camp, and then in the games, it was not what we saw. And then not that he's been bad in practice at all, but I think it hasn't been as good as the beginning, and I fear maybe he is a little bit going through it in his head right now.
You saw the confidence leave his body in that Hall of Fame game. You really did.
And I will say on Tuesday, he did have a good practice. They scrimmaged. He only had 2 drives. Capped one with a really nice throw, and then led a red zone period touchdown against the first team defense. Fired a slant to Jacoby Keeney James, and it looked good. So he had a good practice yesterday. I just think that there has been some sort of practice drop off since early in camp, and I think that has more to do with mental than physical at this point. But that's enough on the backup quarterbacks, I think.
Yes. Let's get to the running backs. Hard locks, we got Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Sione Vaki. Soft locks, now you put this part of the prep sheet together. You got Craig Reynolds in there. I have not had him making my last few 53-man rosters. I think ultimately with the injury stuff, some moving and shaking on the roster, I think I am going to have him probably making the roster in my last projection here as things start to shake out. But he's really the only one who's up for debate. And I think if you talk to a lot of people besides me, that's not really up for debate. So that's kind of the one thing we're looking at. The 2 running backs behind him right now, they got Jacob Sailors and
Jackson.
Deion Jackson. Those guys really probably don't have a shot of making the roster. One of them could end up on the practice squad. I wouldn't be surprised if Jacob Sailors ended up on the practice squad because he has looked good at times in camp and preseason. But what are your thoughts on Craig Reynolds?
Yeah, Sailors runs hard. On Reynolds, the reason why I put him in the middle category here is because as much as you've had him on the bubble for years, I feel pretty confident that he's making this roster. Like I would be pretty surprised if he doesn't. So I thought the happy medium must have put him in the little soft lock category here. I just think what he does on special teams and that he is reliable. And for as much as Vaki does have the upside, we just haven't seen it. Like I would prefer to carry a running back that we have seen step in and be competent. So that's why I have Reynolds.
Something that a lot of people bring up is the scene from 2022 Hard Knocks where they say like, oh, you can't cut Craig. It's John Morton, and he says you can't cut Craig Reynolds. He's everything that we're about. And they didn't. They kept him. But the next year they cut him, and they only kept 3 running backs, and one of them was a fullback. So I don't know. Like that is at the end of the day, my whole thing with him is like, do you need 4 running backs on the roster? I understand that what he does in special teams is unique, but I think you mentioned the other day, like Vaki does exactly what he does. He can take on the same workload of special teams, but I think so far you could argue Sione Vaki's a better special teams player than Craig Reynolds, and that's not Craig Reynolds' fault. Sione Vaki played safety in college. He's like equipped to handle those types of responsibilities. But when I look at the roster and I'm trying to find ways to get guys on, that's the first place I look to because they do have 3 running backs, so I think you feel pretty okay trusting on game days, and then if you have to figure something else out, you go from there. But it's just like the opportunity cost of keeping a 4th running back. And if you want to talk about like, would you rather have Reynolds or Hooker? Like, it's just like the upside of keeping Hooker is just so astronomically way higher than keeping Reynolds. And it has nothing to do with who Craig Reynolds is as a player. It's just like Hendon Hooker's a quarterback. And if he works out in any sort of capacity, that is a monumental boost to your franchise's ability to win football games. Whereas Craig Reynolds, what he gives you. And at the end of the day, he is somewhat, I don't want to call him replaceable, but the opportunity cost of cutting him versus cutting somebody like, somebody else, I think is just different.
Yeah, I think when me and you have had these discussions about our 53s, we're pretty in lockstep with most of it. There's probably like 4 players that like are fluctuating. And on offense, I think we've almost been like carbon copies of each other, except I've had Hooker out, I've had Reynolds in, and then vice versa for you. That's been the one change I think that we've had on our offensive projections. And what's funny is I think at the end of it all, I think you're going to have Craig Reynolds in, and I'm going to have Hendon Hooker in at the end of it. And we're going to find elsewhere to fit those, elsewhere to cut to fit those guys in our projections. I just think with a roster that you're hoping wins the Super Bowl this year, I do value Craig more than I value Hendon because, like I said, I understand what you're saying about like the upside. Well, with the upside with the quarterback thing, but again, it goes to my point. It's just like you said, Hendon is probably not going to command a lot of cap space when he hits free agency. But okay, so you're going to sign him to like a 1-year deal. But what are you going to see from Hendon over the next 2 years that would make you confident that like he can be the succession plan to Goff? And I don't even think Goff is going anywhere in the next 2, 3, 4 years anyway. So that's why like I'm picking the here and now with Craig Reynolds, and also I just don't think even if it does work out with Hendon, I don't even know what working out looks like because I don't think Goff is going anywhere.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you just got to use your imagination a little bit more, All right, let's move on to wide receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Khalif Raymond, Isaac Tesla. Those are your 4 hard locks. We got one soft lock, and that being Tim Patrick. We're pretty sure he's going to make the roster, but it remains to be seen. And then I think 2 players who are firmly on the bubble in Dominic Lovett or Jackson Meeks. Now, maybe the Lions just decide, hey, screw it. Let's keep 7 wide receivers. I just don't see that happening. But to your point earlier about what they brought to special teams, they being Tesla, Lovett, Meeks, guys like that, maybe they do. Maybe they do find a way to keep 7 receivers on the roster. I would be a lot of bit surprised, but there is a path to that outcome.
Yeah. 7 is aggressive, and I wanted to keep 7 really bad. I ended up with 6, and it's the 4 plus Patrick to make it 5. And I picked Lovett over Jackson Meeks. And it's just because I think they're both active on special teams. I think Meeks played like something like 12 or maybe even more special team snaps against the Dolphins. He does do a lot. I just think Lovett was a really, really good gunner at Georgia. And I think the opportunity for him to continue doing that across from Dorsey is his value. And wide receiver 6 should probably never, knock on wood with injuries, should probably never touch the field on offense if things go well. So that's why I kept Lovett for his role as a gunner. And also, he's not going to be the punt returner this year. Like, that's Khalif's job. But he has been returning punts in the preseason, in practice. And Khalif is entering the final year of his deal. And maybe Khalif decides, I'm comfortable here in Detroit. I want to stay here. And he does come back at an affordable number next year. But the guy's also been an all-pro now for, 2 years running, like as a punt returner. Like, maybe he does command more from somebody out there. And maybe the Lions, as we saw with the Alex Anzalone situation, are not in position to give veterans money like that. So maybe he is your long-term Khalif Raymond replacement. And I think I think the equal to Khalif Raymond on the outside is Tim Patrick, and you already have your Tim Patrick in Isaac Tesla moving forward. So that's why I leaned Lovett over Meeks. But, maybe they could surprise and keep 7. You're muted.
My man. Thank you. Tight end. We got 2 hard locks. Sam Laporta, Brock Wright. I'm at the point where I'm almost ready to put Shane Zylstra in the hard locks category just because he's been repping as tight end 3 all camp. He has made a lot of plays in practice. He's a frequent target. Sam Laporta's been out for a little bit now, and Shane Zylstra has just been kind of jumping in. He continues to make catches even with the first team. And I don't really think any other tight end behind him has done anything to kind of, state their claim for a spot.
Yeah, I agree. Zach Horton's shown that versatility. He got some first-team reps recently with Laporta out, like the H-back role, the full-back lineup at tight end. I just think that Zylstra has been really good, more consistently getting reps with the first team, and he's also been really good in those reps, given what you expect from a tight end 3. So, yeah, I agree with you.
We can move past that one pretty quickly. Offensive tackle, hard locks, we got Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker, Giovanni Manu. Soft locks, Dan Skipper, and then we'll see what happens with Jamarco Jones. I think he's another candidate to make this roster as well. He's been with the team for a while, practice squad last year, training camp this year, a little bit injury derailed, but he's been back and ready to go for a while. And, I think ultimately, they probably want him to maybe play a significant role on this team if Taylor Decker does get hurt.
Yeah, if all goes well, I would imagine that they would really hope to get Jamarco back on the practice squad. If he doesn't make the team, like he absolutely, I would be surprised if they were to keep 5 tackles, including the starting 2, plus Manu, plus Skipper, plus Jones. But I'm not like totally ruling that world out. Dan Skipper has shown some guard flexibility. I know it's not what you want from a 6'9" tackle, but 2 years ago he did play some games at guard. And then obviously last year started a couple games at tackle and plays for Decker. I do think that Skip is pretty firm in OT3 and Jamarco is OT4. And it would require the Lions keeping 5 tackles to keep them all on the roster. But like I said, perfect world. I think Jamarco ends up back on the practice squad.
Interior offensive line. Hard locks, we've got Graham Glasgow, who's going to play center this year, Tate Ratledge and Christian Mahogany. Soft locks, we've got Coyote Awashika. He's been around with the team for a long time, been pretty consistently repping as the next man up on that interior there. And then guys up for discussion, Kingsley Agwakun, Tristan Colon, and Netane Muti. Kingsley, to me, is kind of the front runner for this job if Tristan Colon doesn't get back and healthy in time, at which point, if that is the case, maybe that's a little bit of a tougher decision that they have to make there, because they did put Tristan Colon at center to start the game against the Falcons when he got hurt with an elbow injury. But I think you definitely have to keep one of them, because you don't really have a backup center outside of Tate Ratledge, who has never actually played center. He's played center for 3 days of practice, and I don't think you can really go into a game trusting that, because I can't remember if I brought this up on the podcast last time we talked, but the whole thing with putting Tate Ratledge at center was the idea that you could have Graham Glasgow next to him, kind of helping him run shop there. And if Graham Glasgow's hurt, you're not going to feel all that comfortable putting Tate Ratledge there, I don't think. Kind of just in between 2 other inexperienced players who don't really have a lot of time on task helping him, or just doing it themselves, let alone being able to help somebody else at the center position. So I think they're going to try to keep somebody who can play center for real.
The last time that we saw Tate Ratledge snap a ball was July 22nd, and it is now August 20th. And Dan Campbell said earlier this week that they should and want to give him, some reps there just in case. I just don't think you go a month without giving snaps to a guy if he's going to be your backup center, even if he's a rookie trying to get his feet wet at right guard. I just don't think you can go a month without that guy repping at center, and then again, knock on wood, something happens. Glasgow turns an ankle and misses the second half against Green Bay. Now all of a sudden you expect Tate Ratledge in his NFL debut after not snapping a ball for a month to slot in there at center. I do think they are going to keep a second. It would have been Cologne for me because of him starting. I think he was repping earlier, and I think Kingsley was at this point before Cologne got hurt was slipping a little bit. But with the injury and Kingsley rebounding, I think he had a good game against Miami, and he is trending up positively. I do think that he is in the driver's seat to make this roster as the backup tight end, the backup center to Graham.
All right, defensive tackle. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, we've got let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 hard locks here. DJ Reader, Tyleek Williams, Roy Lopez, Mekhi Wingo. And no real soft locks behind him. I know you and I have talked about Pat O'Connor. Kind of seemed like, at least early on in training camp, he would be one of the guys who is thought to be a front runner for one of these jobs, especially after he came in last year, did a little bit of everything for this team. But then he had to miss some time with an injury in camp. And in the meantime, guys like Chris Smith and Keith Cooper Jr. have been turning it up a little bit. So Broderick Martin as well in the last game had a pretty good game rushing the passer. And I still think he probably hasn't done enough in camp. The body of work, as Campbell would say. But for me, it comes down to O'Connor, Keith Cooper Jr., Chris Smith, and maybe you can throw Miles Adams into that category as well. But I ultimately don't think that I think he's probably 4th or 5th in line of this group of guys that we're talking about. So I think it comes down to Pat O'Connor, Keith Cooper, Chris Smith. How many guys do you keep from that group? Probably only one more, I'm guessing.
I think it's one more, potentially two, but I do think one more. Six would be a lot to carry on the interior. It's O'Connor for me. That would be my pick, and then Keith Cooper an extremely close second. And I think you're the opposite of that. I think if I recall correctly, you had Keith Cooper in, and then O'Connor as a close second, or maybe it was Chris Smith. I don't.
I think I had Chris Smith and Keith Cooper in.
Okay.
That doesn't sound right. Let me go look.
It's O'Connor for me just because of what he did for them last year. He was really good, and I think he's had a solid camp. I know he missed a little bit of time, but he got some run with the ones yesterday. Not much. Keith Cooper did as well, to be fair. So, like, if I'm going to say that about O'Connor, go ahead.
By the way, real quick, I had Keith Cooper and Chris Smith, but I also had Mekhi Wingo on PUP, and that's development that's changed. So, yes. Probably, I don't know. I like Cooper because of his inside-outside versatility, you know?
Yeah, Cooper, I think, really hinges on the whole Josh Pascal thing, which we'll get into edge in a second, because he's the same inside-outside thing. And we're going to include Pascal in ours as a guy that makes this team right off the bat, because even though he has to practice some to get back in the swing of things, as Dan Campbell said, I just don't think you can really afford, especially with Hassanin's injury, to put that guy on the shelf for the first 4 games and just knock him out for a month. We're going to get to the edge stuff in a second. To put a bow on the defensive tackles, I picked O'Connor. I will say about Miles Adams, though, is that Dan Campbell, and again, with the unprompted shout-outs that maybe we read too much into sometimes, Dan Campbell talking about interior guys. Miles Adams, obviously I knew who he was. He started games for this team last year when all the injuries happened. Him and Jonah Williams were kind of those inside interior defensive tackles that were added. I think they started the Packers game. And Miles Adams also had a sack, I want to say, in one game late in the year. I think it was against Chicago. He just kind of wasn't on my radar. I had guys like O'Connor and Keith Cooper and Chris Smith kind of comfortably ahead of him. But Dan Campbell gives Miles Adams an unprompted shout-out the other day, talking about guys on the interior that are making decisions difficult for this team come roster cutdown day. I am interested in what they do here. I think they keep 5, maybe 6, but I think there's like 8, maybe even 9 guys if you include Broderick, who's had a pretty strong preseason, that I see as deserving.
Yeah, outside of maybe cornerback, it is even then, I think it's probably just secondary at large. This is without a doubt the most wide open position group in terms of players on the bubble.
Yeah, and it's because Levi and Aleem being out, it totally just throws it all for a loop. You need some more interior pass rush from that 3 tech spot.
Yeah, edge. Obviously, the Ahmed Hassanin injury update that we had means he is out, and he was one of the guys who, we look at this edge group, it kind of seems set in stone, regardless of what anybody on the bubble did. But his injury does potentially open up another spot on the edge, and definitely, obviously, another roster spot. So hard locks, we've got Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport, Al-Quadin Muhammad, and Josh Pascal. Pascal's interesting because he started the camp on NFI. Sounded like the plan was for him to start returning to practice in September. So maybe they just keep him on NFI to start the season, and then, have him start practicing week 2 or something like that. And then, get him ready for an early October-ish return. But right now, I think we're going to assume that Josh Pascal makes this roster. So that gives us 4 roster locks, and then no real soft locks. I would say if anybody, it's probably Nate Lynn. I think he's kind of a step ahead of Isaac Ukwu in that edge room, just because of the body of work and what he's done throughout camp, what he's done in the preseason games. And Ukwu obviously coming off a really good game with the pressure or with the sack. And I think maybe another pressure in there too. So going to be interesting there. But I think if I had to pick today, I think it's Nate Lynn, no question.
I agree that I would pick Nate Lynn, but it is interesting, kind of the variant.
And real quick, Brad Holmes asked by TJ Lang on the broadcast during the Dolphins game, which edge rushers are sticking out to you who are maybe on that roster bubble? And Brad Holmes said Nate Lynn. So
right. It is interesting though that I think we didn't include Mitchell Gude here because I think Lynn and Ukwu we would have ahead of him at this point. But with the 3 of them, that they do offer all 3 different varying skill sets, where Agude looks like he was sculpted out of iron steel and is this power guy. Nate Lynn is a little bit more bendy speed, and then Uku's kind of in the middle of them. And you saw that in the Dolphins game where the sack that he got was kind of from a little bit of an interior alignment. It was 4-eye, so inside shoulder of the tackle. So there are three varying skill sets, and the Lions have seemed to favor when you're talking about a guy opposite Hutch, favor the guy that is more stouter, pocket pusher, stronger. But I think Lynn has just been so good that I would lean him still, even though he is more of a speed bendy type.
Yeah. Moving on to the linebackers, we've got 4 hard locks here. Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell, Derek Barnes, Grant Stewart. Obviously, keep in mind Malcolm Rodriguez is going to be back at some point this season. And then for soft locks when we're talking about the 53-man roster, we've got Trevor Nowaski and Zach Cunningham, I think, are next up on the depth chart there. And then behind them, you got Anthony Pittman, Ezekiel Turner. Just with the way that things have shaken out, I don't really anticipate either of them actually challenging for a roster spot. Maybe they'll surprise us. Both those guys could end up being like core special teamers or whatever. But I think for right now, just with the way that the roster is set up and the play you've gotten from Zach Cunningham on defense, I think makes him a pretty viable candidate to make this roster out of camp. But obviously, the age thing, that he's a vested veteran, so maybe you can do so. He's a player who is a candidate to have some roster gymnastics performed on him, if you will, because they could make an agreement with him to, hey, we're going to cut you, but 2 days later, after we put these guys on IR, do this or do that. Like we want to bring it back. So that's definitely possible as well. And then Trevor Nowaski, I think the interesting thing about him is he hasn't had the greatest camp or preseason. And maybe I'm just holding on to something that I shouldn't, but I just remember when they lost him a couple years ago via a waiver claim with the Arizona Cardinals, they were not happy about it. And they obviously were pretty motivated to go out there, bring him back. And in the year or two since, he started big games. He's played a ton of big snaps, but I'm just not sure what they're going to do with this linebacker position.
And beyond that, sticking with Nowaski, he's really the only guy that we've seen play Sam behind Derek Barnes. The only guy that can kind of do it, that has that the ability to be a pass rusher and fall back into coverage. So I think that is his value, and which is why I would have him making the team. I think it's those top 6. It's the 4. It's plus Nowaski. It's plus Cunningham, because I thought he's had a really good camp, especially as a run defender, kind of in that Jack Campbell, like real good run defender role. So I'm going to pick those 6 to make it.
I will say though, like, I don't necessarily know that you need a backup for every style of type of player. Like, you could just adjust, like and because I hear you, like, and I've kind of had that same thought all along, but that might be, I do wonder if, like, at the end of the day, it's just like whatever, Sam's a hard position. It's really unique. You don't need to have a backup for him. We can maneuver in some other way.
Agreed, but they didn't. Well, so I don't want to say they didn't pivot last year. They did pivot. They played, like a lot of nickel and whatnot. Trevor Nowaski did still play 236 defensive snaps. Like, that role still did exist in some capacity.
Yeah. All right, secondary. We've got for locks, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, DJ Reed, Taron Arnold, Amik Robertson, Khalil Dorsey, Avonte Maddox, Rocky Scene. I think it can probably be thrown into that group as well. But then for guys who are firmly on the bubble with a chance to make the roster, Nick Whiteside, Eric Hallett, Maurice Norris, Lawrence Strickland. Right now, I think, let's see how many we got here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 locks. I'd say you probably want to get up to about 10 DBs total on the team. If you add Rocky Scene, that's 8. Where do you see them going the rest of the way? Because the interesting thing is that I think this group, this defensive backfield, is more versatile than it has been in years past. Ian Kennelly, another guy that I forgot to bring up there. But, I think so many guys have shown the ability to do each. And maybe they're not as good in one position as they are another. Avonte Maddox, Rocky C, maybe they're not as good just being versatile. But Eric Hallett, he's played outside corner. He's played safety. He's played nickel cornerback. So he's kind of a do-it-all guy. And if you have a guy who does it all, that kind of saves you a roster spot by adding him to the team. So I think Hallett is probably trending towards being a soft lock, but outside of that, I think it gets pretty interesting because, we've talked about Kennelly all training camp long, a UDFA, Grand Valley, great story, local guy, but at the end of the day, it's like, what are you losing if you decide to move on from him because there are players at his position who are playing better? Like, I don't necessarily know that you look at him being like a long-term play because you have Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, and what is the long-term need for him to start? So I don't really think you're too concerned about, oh, if we lose this guy, we could be losing a really good player. Like, even if he does end up being pretty good, he's still 4 or 5 years away from there being an open starting job at his position.
Yeah, I think the reason you keep Kennelly is, as you mentioned, the upside. But Brad Holmes talked about it, and I'm very sorry. I forget if it was on 97.1 or in the ESPN interview. I think he might have gotten interviewed by Kay Adams as well, putting him through the ringer. And we'll talk to him shortly, I'm sure, before or right after training camp ends. But he talked about that the biggest thing that's changed for him is that in 2021, the roster was chock full of these just developmental, like, oh, we got a spot for that guy. We're gonna keep him around this year because we think in 3 years he's gonna be good. And some work out, some don't. Now there really aren't many spots for a guy like that, and I think Kennelly is the prime example of that. Where I'm not going to be surprised if they make an exception for him, like they've made an exception for guys like Manu. Granted, Manu was a third, fourth round pick, and Kennelly wasn't drafted. But I'm not going to be surprised if they make an exception for him, and he is one of those long term developmental guys because maybe he does grow into your long term safety three. But I went with Hallett because of the positional versatility that you were talking about. When you have a guy like Maddox, Hallett, and Rock Yassin who can play, I think Avante can play slot or safety. Yassin can play outside or safety, and he's talked about playing a little bit of nickel. And Hallett for sure plays all five. Talking about nickel, both safety spots, and the outside corner. When he had 3 pass breakups against Miami. One was the deep safety, the dropped interception, which he probably still should have caught. One was as an outside corner, and then the one that he had in the end zone to force the Dolphins into kicking a field goal he was in the box. So that's the true definition of a guy that can play all 5. That's why I have him in. That's why I have them at 9 spots in the secondary. This is a spot where I had them kind of saving a spot, so to speak, where to get a guy like Hendon in, or to get a guy like, I don't know, a guy like Lovett in as your 6th receiver, so you don't have to keep 5. I went a little bit light in the secondary with Hallett here, but Kennelly is right behind.
Yeah, I just feel like with especially defensive tackle, that's one thing. You're rotating those guys in and out. You probably have 5 or 6 defensive. I mean, everybody who's coming to the game is going to play defense probably at some point on the defensive line. With safety though, yeah, you can do a safety rotation and stuff like that. But honestly, and this is Kennelly has had a great camp, but I feel like every single camp you're going to find a guy like this who is intriguing, has a lot of great physical tools. Last year, that guy was Lawrence Strickland. And then he comes here this year and he's just not as good. And he kind of seems to fall behind a little bit. He might still make this team, but just based on, the starting positions that were given out to guys in the last couple of preseason games, I just wonder where his standing is. And ultimately, yeah, Kennelly could end up being a really good safety who plays in the NFL for many years. But at the end of the day, kind of your point about Hendon versus Craig, it's like, what's going to help them win a Super Bowl this year? And I think while you're always having an eye on the future, I think safety 4 is a spot where maybe you're able to kind of, I don't know, make those sacrifices.
I do also think there is opportunity to get him back on the practice squad, depending on how much attention, and I'm sure a lot of attention, NFL scouts and other pro scouts from other teams are spending a lot of attention on these preseason games. But depending how impressed you've been with Kennelly, the Lions liked Kennelly because he was, Grand Valley State local kid at their local workout. They were impressed with him. And then they went back and looked at the tape and they were like, oh, we really like what we see. I do think there is a bit more of an opportunity to get a guy like him back on the practice squad and keep him in the building without having him on the 53, because he was a relatively unknown. He played at D2, was a standout at D2, was a Division II All-American twice, but he still played D2. I do think he is more of one of those under the radar guys. He's not like a Hendon Hooker where I do think if you cut him, he is immediately snatched up by somebody else.
Yeah, Heisman front runner at Tennessee, major
Former third round pick,
marketability. Yeah, third round pick, all that good
a
stuff.
top 100 guy.
And I also think like we get so into this bubble and we're like, oh man, like somebody's definitely going to pick up that guy. Every single team in the league is making tough decisions and assuming that they're going to lose the guys that they cut. So, and it's just not reality. A couple guys will inevitably get sniped. I think of last year, Isaiah Williams. He ends up making the team out of camp, gets sent down to the practice squad, and then immediately somebody picks him up. But I think it's still pretty rare. Like it's like one or two guys a year who you actually have to worry about losing. And so that's something to just think about as well. Like I think when you watch a singular team day in and day out, and you just get used to all this, seeing what they can do, knowing all their strengths, knowing all their weaknesses, I think there's just a skewed perception of, is this guy going to get picked up if they let him go? And I think you don't, just because of what you've seen, you're like, oh yes, absolutely. But there's a lot of players who are going to end up getting cut who could make a roster somewhere, but won't get claimed.
For sure.
So I think we charted this out. We have 38 total hard locks, 9 soft locks, 21 guys up for discussion. So basically the way you wrote it down is if we're going with a 53-man roster and there are 47 guys.
47, my bad.
Making the team, or who we think are safe-ish bets to make the team. There's 21 guys vying for 6 spots. So who are your last in and who are your toughest cuts?
So yeah, my final 6 in were Hooker, Lovett, Agwakin, O'Connor, Nate Lynn, and Eric Hallett. And I really struggled to part ways with Jackson Meeks, Ian Kennelly, Isaac Ukwu, Chris Smith, and Keith Cooper. That's in no particular order, though Meeks and Kennelly are high on that list. I think I would move Keith Cooper way up, maybe the number 1 toughest cut for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with my last one's in Hendon Hooker, Dominic Lovett, Kingsley Agwakun, Chris Smith, Nate Lynn, Keith Cooper. My hardest cuts, obviously, number 1, Craig Reynolds. Like I said, I think when next time we talk, guys, so I think what we should probably do is record a podcast like right after the roster projection comes out. So we'll do we'll do our writing, we'll get all that stuff up, and then we'll probably record a podcast for you guys as a special bonus episode. But I think when I do my final 53-man roster projection after the Texans game, I think I'm going to find a way to get Craig Reynolds on. It's just a matter of, a couple injuries here, a couple injuries there. We'll see how it shakes out. But so far, he has been my toughest cut every single time that I do this. And then Pat O'Connor is another one. Meeks was another one. I didn't have him making the team. And then there was another one, Nick Whiteside, the cornerback, who is doing everything that has been asked of him. But just, unfortunately for him, I just don't know if there's going to be room for him. And based on what he's another guy who, if he gets cut, maybe somebody picks him up, but he's another one that I really struggle with as well. Cause I wanted to find a spot for him. I think I texted you this, like the way, and I actually wrote this somewhere, but he's like an FCS team. He's playing in a Big Ten road game and he's tied at half. Like he's done everything right, but it's just one little thing can go wrong and everything starts to spiral and it's completely over. And even then his best might not be good enough on this particular day in this particular training camp. So he's had a great training camp, great preseason, but he's another guy who I just couldn't make room for.
That's the exact right way to describe it because again, you've done everything right to this point, but even still going forward, and I'm talking even before the Miami game, to make this team, you are going to have to do every single thing. You are basically going to have to be flawless for like the next 2 weeks. And well, I'm not saying that he was like burnt toast against Miami. He wasn't quite flawless. And I think it's unfortunate for him that a guy that has performed so well, he doesn't have the margin of error in Miami where, I recall that Zach Wilson misses a touchdown where Whiteside did get beat off the line. And I saw he's running back to the huddle and Whiteside is like, shaking his head to himself and almost like, whew, like thankfully that was a missed throw. But still knowing with that said that coaches are going to see that on film, people are going to see that on film and understand that with a starting quarterback, that's probably a touchdown. I think he doesn't have the margin of error that others do, and that's why I have him on the outside looking in. Though I really wanted to find a spot for him because the story's great, he's been great, but I just wasn't able to do it.
All right, moving on to a new game. And we definitely did not invent this game. This is a game that is popular on TikTok and, all the other Snapface and Book Chat and all that other stuff. Pokemon. Blind ranking. Rich has brought 5 receivers to the table. So what are the criteria post 2010 with at least one 400-yard season?
So this is how I collected it. It was 300 yards. So since 2010, yards. There have been 20 receivers that have had a 300-yard season. Tim Patrick had 394 last year, so if you want to kind of phrase it like that. Of those 20 guys, I picked 5 names. Not the best, not necessarily the best. Could be the best 5. I don't want to show my hand here, but I picked 5 of the most interesting, the most enthralling guys, in my opinion. And then I went onto a randomizer website and I said, randomize these 5 names in any order, and it spit out what it spit out to me. So I've got my list here of 5 guys. I'm going to give Nolan one name at a time in the order that the randomizer gave me, and he has to rank these players 1 through 5 without knowing what comes next. So if we were doing a 49ers version of this and I gave him Jerry Rice, you would think you'd put him at number 1. But what if I gave him like Debo? Well, where do you fit Debo into things? Like not knowing, maybe Jerry Rice does. You're muted, but
behind Jerry Rice,
right? But like you don't know that Jerry Rice is coming second. I am excited. I think the order of these names and the names that I picked are gonna put you in a bind here. It puts you in a tough spot. So this new game is
I'm trying to read between the lines here. I feel like that means there's going to be a really good receiver at this last spot. So I think I'm gonna have to hold one of these top spots open for him.
Perhaps, or maybe that's what I want you to think. And it's a guy that had one 302-yard season in 2012, and now all of a sudden he's in your 1 spot. So with that said, this isn't so much of a competition between me and Nolan. We're going to alternate week by week. So I brought the names, he's going to rank, and then vice versa next week. I just think this is a better game to play at home, and I think you would agree.
Yeah.
So without further ado, shall we?
Yeah, give me the first receiver.
Your first name is Kenny Golladay.
Ooh, Kenny Golladay had some really good years with the Lions. Like some spectacular years with the Lions.
For the record, it's Nolan is ranking this kind of however he sees fit. If he wants to go peak for peak, go ahead. Like if he wants to go longevity, go ahead. However you think you want to rank these guys best.
Yeah, I'll say like I'm thinking of it like a greatness score. What do they do? What were their traits? I'm gonna put Kenny Golladay 3 because the Lions have had a lot of good receivers over the years, and no matter what happens, I think I'm comfortable having him at 3.
3 is always a safe spot to put that first guy.
Yeah, but then it puts a fence. Then you got to go 4 or 5. You got to go 1 or 2. It makes it difficult going forward.
It does. Second name I have for you is an interesting name, Anquan Boldin.
Another guy.
Go ahead.
Who at the end of his, came here at the end of his career. I think he only had 1 season in Detroit. Is that right?
That's right. 584 yards and 8 touchdowns.
And that was the year that the Lions, they had like 7 fourth quarter comebacks, and he just always seemed to be right in the mix. I think the Washington game, there was a game against Washington that comes to mind where I think he caught a ball, like the Kirk Cousins led Washington team. Right, pretty sure he caught a ball like in the final second. I just remember him making a lot of big catches for this team. So I'm not going to put him 5, but I am going to put him 4. And again, putting a deeper divide in the back end and the front end here. Anquan Boldin, let's put him 4.
Boldin had an 18-yard go-ahead touchdown with 22 seconds left in that game. So good recall on that one.
Steel trap up here sometimes.
Where'd you have him? I apologize.
4.
Okay, so you have Kenny Golladay.
And I am writing these down. So
good. Kenny Golladay at 3, Anquan Boldin at 4. Your next player is Josh Reynolds.
I gotta go 5. For as like reliable as he was at a lot of points in his Lions career. Now this is not great. I don't feel great about leaving these last 2 spots, 1 and 2. So I guess we'll see how it goes. But Josh Reynolds, very good player, very reliable player. He's made so many big catches. I think back to the the Rams playoff game. And like on that opening drive, he makes this huge catch over the middle to kind of get things started. And it was an explosive. And it was just like, okay, here we go. Like they're ready to go. And he was a good safety blanket for Goff, I felt, down the field. A lot of those in-breaking routes. A perfect player for what they needed at the time. But if I recall correctly, like his statistics were never that earth-shattering. I would venture to guess that his best season in a Lions uniform didn't go over 600 yards receiving. Is that correct?
608 in 23, 1 year.
Oh, that's right, because they got him the incentive that year in the last game, and they kept throwing the ball in the last game. So yeah, that makes sense. But regardless, I think he meant a lot to that team at the time. But if you're talking like which receiver would I rather have play a game with tomorrow, I'm comfortable having Josh Reynolds behind Kenny Golladay and Anquan Bolden.
Okay. Now, for the second to last name here, I'm very excited for Aaron to handle these last two.
I don't like that.
Jameson Williams.
Wow. I'll go two. Honestly, I don't really feel that bad about it. I don't think like let me look up Kenny Galladay's best season because J-Mo already has 1,000-yard season on his resume. Kenny Galladay's best season in Detroit, he caught 11 touchdowns for 1,190 yards. Only had 2 seasons with 1,000+ yards receiving, which is nothing to shake a stick at. But in terms of like his comparison to J-Mo, I think J-Mo has a better skill set. He's one play away from a touchdown. I think if Amon-Ra St. Brown wasn't on this team, he would probably have a lot higher target share. And catch a lot more passes. So I'm going to put him 2, and I actually feel pretty good about that, even though if he hasn't quite matched Kenny Galladay's peak yet.
It feels like Kenny Galladay's played a lot more than 4 seasons in Detroit and a lot more than 6 seasons in the NFL. Like I can't believe that it went from, like you said, that year in 2019 where he is a Pro Bowler, nearly 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, to out of the league after 3 more seasons. Like that,
yeah,
it's bananas.
Yeah.
Your final player.
Man,
you have the one spot left open. It's Calvin
I'm nervous.
Johnson.
Yeah, this is a perfect ranking. This is a perfect freaking ranking. Best receiver in Lions history. Number 1 overall. Number 2, we got Jameson Williams, 1,000-yard receiver. Absolute speed of lightning. Number 3, we got Kenny Golladay. 4, Anquan Bolden. And 5, Josh Reynolds. Did I crush it, chat? Did I crush it or did I crush it?
I think you absolutely crushed it. The one pushback, excuse me, beyond the J-Mo Kenny Golladay thing, because I agree. I think I'm comfortable having J-Mo ahead, but I also see the argument for Kenny Golladay at number 2. I think the one argument other people might have is the Anquan Bolden Josh Reynolds debate, because it was just 1 year for Bolden, and they did both, as you mentioned. Bolden was impactful in those late comebacks. Josh Reynolds was important in getting this team to the NFC Championship game. But at that point, I think you're nitpicking a little bit when you're doing a blind ranking. You don't know what's coming next. I think you did a great job.
And thank you. And I will say, like, unfortunately for Josh Reynolds, his tenure here, after being this great, reliable receiver for them, ended in such a way that I don't think a lot of people were all that upset to see him leave. Which is just that's the nature of sports. You either make the plays and you're a hero, or you don't make the plays and you're the opposite of a hero. So I feel great about that. Anquan Bolden,
that good. I can't. That was good.
I crushed it. Simple and plain. All right, cool. This is a great game.
I was crossing my fingers so bad. I was like, maybe he'll put Golladay at 2 and then be forced to put like J-Mo at 1, and then now Megatron's got to be 3. Like,
yeah.
So,
yeah, no, not going to get in my head. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this next week. I'll see if I can get you in a similar pretzel. So, all right, man. Thank you everybody for listening. Check the subscribe and check us out, or check the podcast feed on when's cut down day? Tuesday.
Cut down day is the 26th, so that would be Tuesday.
So check the podcast feed on Wednesday. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have a podcast for you, and that might just be that podcast for the week. I don't think we'll record another episode the following day, unless we do talk to Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell. But I think right now, going into this next week, that should be our plan: is to record a podcast on Tuesday, post on Wednesday morning for when you're driving to work, driving home from work, going on a walk, whatever you do while you listen to our podcast. Do the laundry, whatever it may be. Rate, review, subscribe if you haven't done that already. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you back here next week. Same time, different day, same place.